fact that you have world leaders even floating this, the fact that you have NATO officials talking about this. I don't have enough time to show you guys all the shit I be seeing, bro. Like I have seen so many like NATO segments on MSNBC, CNN doing research for you guys where they just casually bring up, like, man, it's about time we need to consider sending soldiers over there. And I'll be like, what? The fuck is going on here? And Russia's response to this is hilarious. Russia immediately put this little fucking weasel in his place. Macron says nothing ruled out, including using Western troops to stop Russia from winning the war. So Zoya, wouldn't the only reason they will say something like this if Ukraine is getting their ass absolutely handed to them?
I mean, we know that. I mean, we have U.S. generals, we have U.S. military admitting that they're losing. They're just selling hopium that if only they get more weapons that they can turn the tide. But at this point, way too many top U.S. officials have conceded that Ukraine is losing.
I'll just read a little bit of this, and I'm going to show you guys Putin's response. And then I'm going to show you guys how, even though Macron fucked up, he said what the ruling class is thinking out loud. Because why do I watch corporate media? And Zoya always cringes at me. But why do I watch corporate media? Not for news. I watch it now because I watch it to see what the enemy is saying, what the empire is saying. So their reaction to this was essentially what was like, hey, man, why? Finally someone's saying the quiet part out loud. And then they get upset at the criticism that Macron gets. But let me read just a little bit of this. French President Emmanuel Macron has openly discussed the possibility of sending European troops to Ukraine to help Kyiv win the war against Russia, a potential major escalation to the largest ground war Europe has seen since World War II. Through the possibility of Western democracies putting boots on the ground and Ukraine remains remote, Macron's comments following a summit in support of Ukraine prompted a hawkish response from the Ukraine, from Kremlin. He said that the Kremlin has a hawkish response because Macron says he's about to start World War III. So this is the response that they're talking about here. And this is fucking Russia being gangster as always. And he essentially puts them in their place because NATO and Macron's allies also throws him under the bus. So listen, this is Putin. Putin allies tell Macron, any French troops you send to Ukraine will suffer fate of Napoleon's army. That's gangster as shit. So essentially, and I can show you many quotes from Russian officials and there's a speech from Putin. I'm gonna see if I can find the speech where they essentially like, bro, if you do this, we will fuck you up, homie. You better not fucking do this. This is an insane escalation because we know we are kicking your boy's ass. So because of this, Putin came out like, bro, I fucking wish you would, homie. We will fuck you up. So Germany, NATO, rule out sending troops to Ukraine as Russia rebukes Macron. What does this tell you, fam? The West and NATO is in shambles. What did we tell you guys last year? What did me and Zoya tell you guys last year? We told you guys that the West is walking into a war and a fight that they can't win. And now you got Putin publicly sunning a very significant world leader. I want to show you guys this clip here because this is the corporate media coverage of Macron's putting his foot in his mouth, essentially threatening World War III. And they were essentially saying in this segment, come on, man, doesn't he kind of have a point? Anyway,
wait. I want everyone to keep something in mind before listening to this. We know for 100% NATO troops are on the ground. We could do a whole separate segment, thousands of them. They're just calling themselves mercenaries, but French troops, German troops, Polish troops, the whole NATO has been on the ground. Ukrainians don't know how to operate these sophisticated military systems. So, and we just saw an article come out that it was a British general that was coordinating the entire attack in the Black Sea. So just keep in mind that the NATO troops are already there, and this is gaslighting.
Yeah, well said. So let's watch it. You guys won't. This shit was crazy. Let's watch it.
Come under fire for suggesting the West might deploy troops to Ukraine. But despite that backlash, the Elysee isn't backing down. A palace source says Ukraine's allies must debate the issue. The source says...
You see what they're leading with? I'm going to let it continue. But you guys, come on. What, can we at least debate the issue of starting World War III? Batshit crazy shit we were hearing.
There are all kinds of things ruled out 2 years ago that are no longer ruled out, and that France fears giving credence to the possibility that Russia can win. All this after Mr. Macron's comments, if you remember, on Monday. And to be clear, the French president didn't actually say he wanted to send troops to Ukraine. He only said it's being discussed with other leaders. Here's what he told reporters after Ukraine Aid Summit.
There's no consensus today to officially send, support, and to take responsibility for troops on the ground. But as things...
He had to walk those fucking comments back because you guys saw how NATO and Germany got on his ass. You guys saw how Putin got on his ass. So France and Macron had to immediately backpedal. That's what they're explaining here, but I'll let it continue.
Nothing should be off the table. We will do everything necessary so that Russia cannot win this war.
Well, most European leaders agree on board with the part about defeating Russia, but the idea of sending in their own troops, well, that drew backlash. Officials from a growing list of countries, you can see that, including UK, Germany, Spain, Italy, Slovakia.
Look, even they had to cover it. Look at this. European leaders push back after French president floats possibility. And to be honest, like Zoya just said, they already got NATO troops on the ground. This is them saying, Macron, you fucking idiot. You're not supposed to say it out loud. To be clear. Do you agree with that, Zoya? Because they essentially saying, you doing a Donald Trump, sir. You're not supposed to say that. Because as Macron said in his walk back, come on, man, we were just talking about it. Who's we? Them.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, I'm going to say something that Cornel West never can. Fact check us.
Yeah.
Sure. This is free and public information. You can look up the French deaths in the Ukrainian war, and you can look up videos on their social medias. Oh, okay. So U.S. military won't pay you directly. You go as a mercenary, and we'll pay you indirectly through a private firm. And boom, NATO's not technically involved. Now we don't have to activate Article 5. Macron is. You know, he fucked up. He definitely got confused that we're not supposed to talk about this. We're not supposed to actually talk about it. Remember, there's consequences. So he got carried away with his warmongering in public. But they're also conditioning us because they know as the war continues, and especially after it ends, guys, for years, we're going to be finding out how present NATO was actually there. So they want to condition you to at least accept the fact that it's a reasonable thing for them to be there.
I think this is a possibility as well. Mehdi says, do you think they had Macron floated out there to test the response? I've seen this already with lower level officials where they've been talking about this. The reason why this has gotten so much attention because this is the first time like a world leader say what CNN, MSNBC, Morning Joe, and what all these other NATO sycophants have been saying. So yeah, I think you're 100% right, man. I think that is another reason why he was the first one who was dumb enough to say it out loud. But let's continue the segment because you guys are gonna see how desperate corporate media wants to promote World War III. It's really insane.
And Poland all say they have no plans to send their forces to Ukraine. A NATO official tells CNN the alliance won't be deploying combat troops either. And the Kremlin has also responded following Mr. Macron's comments. A spokesperson says conflict with Russia is inevitable if the West sends troops to Ukraine. And we've just seen in the last few minutes, in fact, that the State Department has also commented on this, the State Department reiterating that President Biden has ruled out sending U.S. troops to fight.
You guys see how even Biden had to say something? Macron, what he did was so out of pocket, saying, man, we should consider this possibility. Even Biden was like, no. No, bro. Shh. Not CNN, though. Let's continue.
Ukraine in response to Macron's comments saying sending Western troops to Ukraine cannot, obviously what Macron heard, cannot be ruled out. So we have response now from the US State Department. Melissa Bell joins me now for more. And Melissa, I mean, it's clear that as we've just outlined there, the European leaders have been pretty swift in their response to Macron's comments. Before we talk about how they're responding individually, just frame for us what Macron said and how it's being received at home.
Well, essentially, what he had to announce in his press conference, and this was, Issa, in response to a question that was asked about whether this issue had been raised and debated over the course of the conference that was held here in Paris. Yes, it had, he said, because it was time that a debate began. The idea is that this should be the beginning of a debate about whether any individual countries, and we've been speaking to Élysée sources since some of that backlash that you mentioned, and what Emmanuel Macron is suggesting is not that France should encourage Germany or Poland or other countries who've now said they will not be sending troops to Ukraine to do so. On the contrary, that individual countries should be considering whether or not they are willing to send perhaps not so much initially combat troops, but things like deminers, people to help with the maintenance of Western equipment, border guards, for instance, to help liberate some Ukrainian troops that they can be redeployed for combat. That is the initial suggestion that was behind Emmanuel Macron's comments. And I think it's important to note that
my question is, how is that still not extreme escalation? I don't believe anything she's saying, by the way. But even if she's telling the truth, how is that still not extreme escalation? But I'll let it continue, because I want you guys to hear a lot of it, so I'll let it continue.
Have been words of support. For instance, Lithuania's foreign minister has said that it is time to consider all the options that there may be amongst Western allies about what may come next. The idea is that 2 years into this war, and with things stagnating as much as they are, that Western allies should be willing to consider individually whether or not they want to get further involved. And I think what the Élysée sources have been saying is that this is important from the point of view of sending a signal to Moscow of strategic ambiguity, that nothing should be off the table in order that Moscow should not assume that what has been will continue to be. And essentially, as you mentioned, Macron's point is that there have been so many issues that have been off the table so far, things that have now been agreed to, F-16s, the sending of long-range missiles, and the sending of troops should be amongst that, he said.
Zoya, you hear that? So essentially the argument is, we escalated before. You guys said we wouldn't do all this other crazy shit we have done. So why not have a conversation about escalating World War III? Come on, we were just flowing it. We can't talk about it. Zoya, any response before I let it continue?
Honestly, anyone that's been paying attention for the last 2 years knows that they've been saying this verbatim this entire time. From the beginning of the war, they've been saying we have to do all we can. They're trying to imply that Europe's next. Putin always counters with, like, they know that's a lie. We have never, had any plans to invade Europe. We're not invading anybody. They have no evidence for this. They are just trying to fearmonger in order to scare their populace. But they have so much civil unrest right now because they crippled their own economies by sanctioning Russia, that there is no way that the European populace would be okay with some kind of forced draft or an actual open war. That's why Macron had to first float it out there, because no matter what, every time they say it, we get desensitized to it. So first he floated it out there, and then he walked it back. No, I don't mean escalation like that. I mean much lighter escalation. But this is all bullshit, because we know the New York Times itself just published an article saying that the CIA was involved in Ukraine for this entire time, way before 2014.
Yes, let me find that.
And while you look that up, so knowing that already the CIA, not Nick, not Zoya, not Russian propaganda, Mr. West, but the New York Times and the CIA themselves are saying that they've been interfering in a foreign country to sow division and Russophobia. So we have that confirmation. And what we know is happening right now is that they are pulling the same thing in Armenia as they did in Ukraine. So as soon as Ukraine ends, however Ukraine ends, they're already setting up the next one. The next conflict is going to be Armenia. And there's reports on the ground from Kazakhstan that there are NGO-funded groups already talking about nationalism and sowing Russophobia. So that's why whatever you guys hear on mainstream media, it's such bullshit. They're telling you what to think. And if you do your own research, you're going to find out it's much worse than that. And these are just chess pieces being put into place. We're not going to learn any breaking news from any of these world leaders. They're just trying to make us accept the narrative.
Yeah, well said. And I'm glad you reminded me about the CIA story, because it shows what we were talking about, how there's already this escalation. So I'm going to play this hotspot that my boy Nico released yesterday. You guys know our boy Nico's killing the fucking game in hotspot. He also back on YouTube. You're not checking out his live streams. What's wrong with you? This boy Nico is back and he's better than ever. Big shout out to them in hotspot. You guys saw my video earlier. This is one that he released yesterday, I believe, talking about the CIA in Ukraine.
The CIA has built at least 12 bases in Ukraine right next to the Russian border. The New York Times reported on Sunday that the CIA has been using spy bases in Ukraine to directly engage and undermine Russia, and more specifically, Vladimir Putin. Now, this relationship between the CIA and Ukraine hasn't always existed. It just coincidentally started after the Maidan coup that was also facilitated by the CIA. In other words, we know the New York Times is trying to boast about how great it is the CIA has been working to undermine Putin. But in reality, what they did was informed us that Ukraine probably should have been invaded by Russia a long time ago, and Russia had every right to defend itself, considering that NATO was involved in trying to undermine their country, and they used Ukraine to do so, and Ukraine was fully aware of it. Oh, and because of the U.S. desire to just keep funding Nazis to kill ethnic Russians in Ukraine, that part too. Now, with the news that NATO powers are considering sending troops to Ukraine to fight Russia, coupled with the fact that we now know that CIA has had spy bases there since 2014, and the U.S. has admitted to even putting chemical weapons facilities in Ukraine along Russian borders as well. Now, from my vantage point, it looks like with this information that we have, no matter how much Putin tried to engage in good faith with the U.S. and NATO powers, they had always planned on military aggression with Russia. There was nothing Putin could ever do. And therefore, all the lives that have been lost in Ukraine and every life that will be lost going forward, if they do choose to continue to engage with Russia, if they do continue to escalate tensions, it will be the fault of the United States and NATO. All that blood will be on their hands, and everyone who enabled them and ran cover for them in the media, it'll be on their hands too.
But Russian imperialism, Zoya, that what Cornball West is worried about. Cornball West says you're on the Jimmy Dore plantation if you're not worried about Putin's imperialism, as the CIA is trying to destroy Russian sovereignty. As his boy, the person he called courageous, is working with these same people that's popping up Ukrainian Nazis to destroy Russia. But Dr. Cornball West wants us to have Putin derangement syndrome, despite these facts that we talk about on our shows, but the PMC class doesn't talk about. Go ahead.
I was dying to debunk this when West was talking, and I'm gonna say it. RBN doesn't say it enough at all. RBN barely makes any money. The amount of money that RBN makes is a joke. There are 6 people to divide these really tiny $15, $20 donations. Yeah, so if literally Nick would make more money just posting a mutual aid link for himself and doing 0 podcasts if money was what he was after. Honestly, I help them out in the back office, and they're just too modest to say this. No one's making any kind of money to be fucking sold out for. We're talking about hundreds of dollars here, Mr. West. So nobody's sold out because no one's making money. And actually what RBN does is risky. It's risky to their freedom, which people forget, because talking about these stories and debunking the mainstream media gets you on FBI watch lists, Mr. West. So this is bravery. Not Navalny the Nazi. This is bravery. And they're not making any money. And Jimmy Dore, love him or hate him, promotes mutual aid work, which you have not, Mr. West. Maybe you have in your lifetime, but you're not promoting this mutual aid work. And you are completely erasing the work of young Black activists, everything they're doing on the ground, handing out diapers, clothing, food, medical supplies. You are erasing all of that by saying that they are on a plantation. You yourself are insulting Black men by saying that they're just following Jimmy Dore's footsteps. And you are not paying attention to what RBN is saying. You need to watch channels like that because you have Western propaganda brain, and it is making you exhibit Western chauvinism even towards your allies.
Do you guys think that I'm employable? You guys realize I sacrifice my professional life for what I do? What I did, I could get a job at any dealership I ever wanted because of my resume. When I decided to leave Toyota, I went to Honda, I went to Volkswagen, just like that. I am unemployable, fam. The second I ever got a real corporate job, you know how fast the Zionists would send my tweets to them? Saying that, oh, look at this Hamas sympathizer you hired. You know how fast they would send my tweets and my live stream to an employer? Saying, look at Nick speaking, he's a Putin supporter. I sacrificed my professional career for this. I don't talk about it a lot because I don't need to brag, but I need to start because people be lying about my name. People have no idea. I made 40 to 45,000 a year selling cars. I made way less than that now. But Dr. Cornel West, who made hundreds of thousands of dollars from a Zionist institution, who take money from speaking fees from capitalists, had the nerve to call me a grifter.
Do you know how many views RBN can have tomorrow if we just start pumping up Trump or Biden, either camp? This is a fringe category. We're against everybody. This is the hardest path you can possibly choose for yourself in independent media, to call out everybody. There is nobody that's going to make RBN go viral except the working class.
Yeah, well said. Let's continue this clip. I'm gonna show just a little. This is gonna be pretty much be a one-topic stream, and then we're gonna do a live coverage of the George Galloway election, and then we will wrap up. I'm going to edit the title of the video. I'm not trying to clickbait you guys to have a plan, but hey, me and Zoya, we got a lot of shit to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the social media story probably Saturday at noon. So I'm gonna edit that out, and I'm probably gonna edit the title of George Galloway winning the election. That's probably what we're gonna do later, Aaron, because I'm gonna talk about the George Galloway story because it's breaking. So let's continue this clip because I want to show you guys what the message of the establishment is regarding this freak out from Macron. And another reason why I find this interesting as a nerd, you guys know I'm a nerd more than anything, is because the point I've been continually making is that corporate media is often more bloodthirsty and pro-war than our politicians. And it's crazy because you just saw Biden put back against it aggressively. Meanwhile, CNN, they're like, oh, come on, let's have a debate about it. I remember Jake Sullivan, and I remember all these Biden officials. They would get grilled by the corporate media, and their message essentially was, Zoya, why aren't you guys doing more for Ukraine? Why aren't you guys sending this? Why aren't you guys sending more bombs? And then like the reaction from Jake Sullivan, these people, was always classic. Because they essentially like, the fuck? Do you know what we have done? How much more war do you guys want us to promote? They're like, why aren't you guys sending more weapons to Taiwan? They're like, the fuck? We already sent weapons to Taiwan. And this is like a pattern I've seen between like the credentialed White House core and the mainstream corporate media. They always press these people to the right. So watch this segment. And remember, keep in mind, they admitted even Biden's push back on Macron. Meanwhile, they're talking about how this should be a legitimate conversation. Let's continue.
Been off the table so far, things that have now been agreed to, F-16s, the sending of long-range missiles, and the sending of troops should be amongst that, Isa.
But the way he framed that line that we heard there sounded like that wasn't discussed at this summit. And at least from what we've heard as well, the kind of pushback we've heard from some European leaders. Was this even discussed at all? He says it's time it's discussed. Was it even discussed?
We've understood that it began to be raised during this conference, but of course there will be a question for individual countries. For instance, France is about to begin debating in its parliament how it goes forward with this war, what its consequences are for France, and we understand that this may be a part of the future discussions. The suggestion was that debate began about this issue, and this should now be a debate and a consideration for individual countries. Not that
now you guys see they confirmed that this quote unquote debate is already happening. So they're really upset for Macron for being the idiot to say it out loud to give Putin a PR victory. Because now Putin and Russia, as you guys see, is going around talking about how the West is wanting to start war with us. We was right to do this military action. I'll just show you guys one slice of the pie. Russian media is having a field day with Macron's blunder. You guys know the real political gaffe is when they tell the truth. So they're upset because he said the quiet part out loud. But let's continue.
NATO or the European Union should send troops in, but that individual allies may now consider something that until now had been something of a red line. And I think the response from Moscow, the very strong response, this was would inevitably lead to a confrontation between NATO and Russia, is an indication from the point of view of the Elysee that that message has been heard, that everything is possible and that they need to be paying attention, Isa.
Very important context there from our Melissa Bell in Paris. Great to have you on, Melissa. Thank you very much. Let's get more analysis on this. I'm joined now by Reem Montas. She's a research fellow for European foreign policy and security at the
Let's hear what this psychopath says when we wrap this up.
Reem, welcome back to the show. You would have heard there Melissa Bell talking about this in detail, but you would have seen, Reem, the European leaders being kind of very swift, very quick as well, and tough on their response, themselves really trying to distance themselves, just to say, from Macron. What do you make, first of all, Reem, of how Macron framed it here?
So unlike his usual way of talking, Macron was pretty prudent in the way he answered the question. What had happened is that before this conference that he had organized with about 20 heads of state and government, mainly from Europe, to look at how European countries can do more to support Ukraine in its fight for survival, the Slovak prime minister had raised this issue of possibly sending Western troops to Ukraine. He had not talked about Western troops engaging in any kind of frontline combat, of course, against Russian troops. And so at the presser, Emmanuel Macron was asked to comment on that statement by the Slovak prime minister. And he basically said this had come up during their conversations and their discussions during that conference, and that nothing could be ruled out, and that the main message should be to send to Russia is that the Europeans are going to do everything that is necessary in order to ensure that Russia doesn't win. So he was quite non-committal because go ahead, Isa. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I mean, that is a message that we have been hearing, that it does seem to be a shift, at least in tone, Reem. I mean, I don't know if you heard Melissa saying that for Elysee Palace source telling CNN, the question of key allies sending troops to Ukraine is, quote, a debate that we must have. So clearly not backing down at all. But we have heard in the last, few hours, I should say, support also, Reem, from some allies. Well, a friend of the show here, the Lithuanian foreign minister, who said, I'm going to bring it up, Europe's fate is being decided on the battlefields of Ukraine. Times like these require political leadership, ambition, and courage to think out of the box. The initiative...
You guys see how badly the anchor wants this to happen? She wants this to happen more than anything. And she's gonna platform and highlight the people who supports the conclusion that she wants to see happen. Why not talk about World War III, guys? Let's continue.
Behind the Paris meeting yesterday is well worth considering. So not complete. I mean, some believing, like Landsbergis, this might be the moment to start talking about it.
To be honest, some aspects of this idea have been discussed among allies for the past couple of weeks in various fora, not necessarily at the highest levels, but there have been some testing grounds to see who might be willing to do this and what they might be willing to do. Of course, everyone...
There it is. That answers someone's question. I forgot who asked that question. Was he flowing this out to test the reaction? She just confirmed it. She said it was a good testing ground. Let's continue.
Mind that they don't want to lead to any kind of escalation, any kind of direct combat.
That's a lie.
Any kind of direct contact between Western military and Russian military. So that is front of mind. They're also looking rules of engagement, if they send in trainers, for example, to train Russian troops, which, by the way, they have been doing in Poland, they have been doing in the UK, they have been doing in Germany, if they decide to move that training, say, to the western side of Ukraine, parts closer to the Polish border, does that really change things? And how can they do it in a way that is safe and that does not escalate the situation with Russia? Very serious people are looking at this. They're also looking at doing, as Melissa had said, you know, any kind of support with demining and other such activities.
So this is a big conversation in the West. Macron is the first world leader to put his foot in the mouth, but they keep confirming over and over again that this is the direction that we're going. And I agree with a lot of people in the chat that are saying that the fact that this conversation has already been had means the decision is made. They beta testing, they slow rolling their plan to escalate this. And the funny thing is, as the West continue to float the idea of escalating war with Russia, and when they've reached the conclusion that we have to send troops to fight against Russia, they keep lying about the fact that it is Putin who wants to invade the rest of Europe. And Zoya, you can speak on this as well, because Putin is tired of this, and he's even speaking out against this nonsense. And this is Putin speaking out regarding the West's willingness to escalate this conflict, where he clearly don't want. The West provoked conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and other regions. But now they declare Russia will attack Europe? Everything they are making up and scaring the world with poses a threat of nuclear war, the end of civilization. Don't they understand that? So what he's saying is this saber rattling that they're doing, this messaging campaign that they must stop Putin or he will march into Europe, even though he never ever hinted the fact that he wanted to do that. That is designed to promote never-ending war, and it will lead to nuclear war and World War III. And you guys think I'm bullshitting? This is the messaging you hear all the time from the Biden administration, the corporate media, and the military-industrial complex, which is straight-out bullshit. You hear Nikki Haley say this all the time. They say this, Putin's going to invade Europe and Russia. As a fact, it is a straight up lie. And here's a State Department official, one of the lead heads, the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, repeating the same thing. And Zoya, I want you to respond to this. And also, if you want to, explain why this narrative is bullshit after I play this video.
Rain falls. Again, Putin won't stop there. He will just continue to move forward and attack and take on the sovereign territory of his neighbors. And so, if you're a Baltic state, you're really worried about whether or not you're next. And so they know Putin. They know that what he's capable of. And quite frankly, if Ukraine falls, I really believe that NATO will be in a fight with Russia. You
must understand, these are not crackpots saying this. This is the defense secretary. And Zoya, I want to bring you in, but one more thought. You guys notice how the narrative on the Ukraine changed since the United States funded the genocide in Gaza. Because the genocide in Gaza destroyed the Ukraine narrative. And I've reported on the fact that European officials who supported the Ukraine war, they lost faith in the United States because they were dumb and they were sweet summer children. They really believed that the United States cared about sovereignty. They cared about preventing war crimes. They cared about civilian deaths. Now you have Israel that is blowing Russia out of the water when it comes to war crimes. They have killed more children in like the first 2 days of the campaign than the entirety of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. You have like 3 times more children killed in Gaza than Putin was accused of kidnapping. You know the thing that got him an ICC charge? So now, before the Gaza genocide, they were saying, oh, we got to stand up against war crimes. We got to stand up against democracy. We got to stand up against the death of civilians. And now, ever since Gaza, they know they can't say that no more. So they have shifted the narrative. Now, don't get me wrong. They always said some version of this. I don't want to mislead. They always said some version of this, but now this is the main message. Now it's not about the stopping war crimes, civilian deaths. We can't even fucking pass that off no more. So now the main message coming from them is, "Hey, we gotta stop them now, or you're gonna invade Europe." Zoya, you want to take it from here? Anything you want to add?
Well, Nick, have you considered what nuclear war can do for you and your family?
And then nuclear war is a strong campaign. I mean, usually war will help presidents, but that's not the age we're in now. But go ahead, Zoya.
I'm going to read a small excerpt from the NATO manual, the Soviet Operation Maneuver Group, a new challenge to NATO. And this is from 1983, just so you guys know how long this was in there. We should remember that NATO leaders have stated categorically that in the event of a Soviet attack, NATO will initially fight a conventional battle. Figures of 5 or a few days are usually quoted for this phase. NATO will eventually resort to tactical nuclear weapons when conventional defensive measures fail. So the only one with a stated mission to use nuclear tactical devices is actually NATO. It's like you always say, Nick, with stories regarding Israel, how every story is a confession. That's what you have to keep in mind when these leaders are talking about invading sovereign countries, because it is actually a NATO tradition to invade countries like Somalia and Libya and Yugoslavia. It is not a Russian tradition to do this. The largest warmongers are always accusing their victims of what they're actually perpetrating.